Chris, I think first up, as I have spent some of my days over the summer reading your wonderful book here. Hold on, I'll hold it up a bit more for people if they're viewing. Build, Sell, Retire. It's a very good read. Plug over. I have obviously learned a fair bit about you, the business, the advice that you give in the book. But I suppose just as a sort of starters for the people who perhaps aren't so aware of you, good self, and your story and the challenges, maybe we could sort of set the scene on, how you became such a successful entrepreneur as a sort of starting point, and then obviously look at diving into some of the kind of key areas that you pinpointed in the book, and also have some good opinions on from our previous conversations. Is that a good starting point? I know it's a bit of a vast topic, but I just kind of how did it all begin, really?
How did it all begin? It all
the hero
began,
story, yeah.
Yeah, it all began in a caravan in the Midlands, I guess. That wasn't where I was conceived, thankfully, but that's where I ended up after my parents went bankrupt and lost pretty much everything. So one day living in a big house, next day living in a caravan in a field next to a derelict property. And even though I didn't really know it at the time, I'd obviously witnessed quite a dramatic change in lifestyle, and the things that seemed important before, when I was living in a much happier, more comfortable life, suddenly weren't very important to me, and actually just getting by were much more important. I didn't really recognize that at the time, but I definitely put that down to what's given me a drive, and my drive has always been, I don't want to end up screwed. I don't want to end up going bankrupt because I owe someone something, and circumstances have arisen and I can't get myself out of that situation. So that's part of my drive. And I was also, I'm dyslexic, and dyslexia when I was at school, I'm left-handed, and I was told to write right-handed, forced to write right-handed in my kind of primary school, because I was being awkward. And I probably am and was quite an awkward person. So I just really had to push back against what society and my teachers and everyone thought was the norm, and prove myself and continue to keep proving myself. So I hated school. I hated learning at school. I hated structured learning. I love sport. I love doing things like joining the cadets, because you go out, run around, shoot guns, not sit in a classroom learning about an oxbow lake. And no one ever has used their knowledge of oxbow lakes or crop rotation
until now
in their career. And no, I still have never found a use for it. So I guess, a lot of entrepreneurs come from backgrounds where they have had a challenging upbringing, and I had a very gifted upbringing in the end. Everything worked out, and I was very lucky. But you often read the books and stories about entrepreneurs who've just had a tough life. Very difficult home life, difficult parents, broken families, alcoholism, living on the breadline, and lots with learning disabilities. The number of dyslexic entrepreneurs is massive. In fact, probably the majority have some form of cognitive learning issue. So
dyslexia also runs in my family as well. So I'm with you there.
Yeah. And so it's a big thing. So that's that. I guess I always wanted to prove myself, and then when I got a chance to set my business up in 2003, not really by
before we go there, Chris, because I think there was a bit of a period where I picked up in the book. Were you a management consultant at some point? And it was quite interesting, some of the comments you made around that, as I suppose how the approach to work didn't really kind of fit in with your psyche, I think would probably be my interpretation. And you found it was an experience that I suppose maybe propelled you into wanting to do your own or create your own business even more.
So working for a consultancy, I kind of accidentally ended up in consulting. I used to work for Bupa, running their digital team, and got to a point in my career there where I wasn't going to go much further. So I walked across the road, went for an interview at Arthur Andersen because a friend was doing the recruitment. And it was in the days when Oyster Partners, Wheel, Deep End, everyone was exploding. I mean, you literally couldn't hire digital savvy people for love nor money. And Arthur Andersen couldn't hire anyone. So I went for an interview, didn't want the job, went in jeans and a t-shirt, wasn't going to wear a suit. And I was interviewed by a guy called Neil Alcock and another chap called Simon Post. And they basically said, come and work here. We've got great clients. We do great tech, great consulting. We have no design capability. Every job you do successfully will hire more people for you. And if you screw it up, you know where the door is. Done. That was like the easiest interview I've ever had in my life. I actually took a pay cut to go there because I thought, what an amazing challenge. And Andersen's was actually a brilliant place to be and learn about how to do everything. You know, you're instantly responsible for growing a team, for meeting clients, preparing quotes and pitches, and integrating with a much wider organization. And so it definitely gave me the knowledge, tools, and confidence to do something myself. The reason I left is we were unfortunate to be caught up in the Enron scandal, and the American government decided that Arthur Andersen should take the fall for the accounting errors and wound us up. Oh. So I was actually on a sabbatical at the time and left, and then I came back and worked for agency.com for a few months doing UX, UI, sort of information architecture, very early days. I didn't feel they really loved what they were doing. They were kind of just monopolizing a position for money, and I thought I could do better. So that's how I ended up kind of jumping ship and setting up my own business, in 2003.
And that business was, from my understanding, the one and only business.
Yep.
Yeah. And the name of the business for people listening?
Well, it's been through a number of different changes, because you kind of come up with a business name to register it. So it was called CAD Interactive, Chris Averill Designs to start with, which was a hangover from a university project. Then I changed it to, we were working out in the Middle East, and I wanted a better name. So I was going to open up multiple offices. We are London, we are Dubai, we are New York, global expansion. But the global expansion slowed down in 2009 when the whole world sort of collapsed. So I then rebranded it to what we really were, which was we're an experience design business. So we were called We Are Experience, and shortened down to WAE. A bit like branding Orange, the mobile phone company. It doesn't really matter what you call it if it works.
Mm-hmm. And from my understanding, Chris, that when you renamed it to We Are Experience, that was probably the pivot or the moment that the business suddenly started to grow and scale somewhat aggressively. Would that be right?
Yeah, we'd reached a point where we got a certain level of work and a certain amount of recognition in the industry, and we were growing quickly off the back of the 2009 sort of downturn. So we had a few years of really good growth. We then had a bit of a hiccup again, through my career, I've had a couple of real setbacks. All through partly my fault, mostly economic, environment, but not planning, not thinking forwards, not acting quickly enough, being caught up in the emotion rather than being rational about decision making. But
were any of those events, Chris? I mean, obviously, I look at the context of the week we've had in terms of power, and I seemingly remember when I was at Bloomberg, we hosted an event on new energy, and several of the founders of companies like Bulb and other power companies kind of came in, and it was kind of all a bit too good to be true. But the point I'm getting to, or the question I'm leading to here, was when you had those two events or cataclysmic kind of episodes or things that were thrown at the business that you had to get over, a bit like Bull with the event they've had this week. kind of somewhat out of their control, in essence, that they probably never even planned for this to happen? Was that similar to your situation, or
so it's
not?
entirely their fault, and it's entirely my fault, and it's as simple as that. You fail to prepare to fail. Honestly, if I fail to prepare for the worst case scenario, it's totally my fault, because it's going to happen at some point. Every business gets a kicking. At some point, every business it has something happen that's out of their control, and if you haven't planned for it, it will screw you, and it's your own fault. And we'll talk about it actually. About I want to talk in a bit around who's monopolised COVID and who's failed to monopolise it, and why. And part of it is along this line of thinking. So it is my own fault. I just didn't have enough cash reserves. I hadn't forward planned. When times are good, you kind of, you're going for it. And the same is very true. A lot of product and service innovation that we've seen over the years. The boom and bust effect is a land grab. People are just going as fast as they can, growing as quickly as they can, take as much money as they can, without really thinking about what a great business looks like. So if anyone hasn't read Good to Great, I think it's Jim Collins, is it? You should read Good to Great. It's the best business manual in the world, full stop. And it talks about exactly this. There are lots of booming companies like Airbnb or Tesla who've never actually been through difficult times. So it's hard to say they're a great company because they've never failed. And it's only when you fail, you learn and then improve. So that's why you see all the car companies like Ford, Fiat, etc. VW suddenly booming in the electric car market, because they've been here before. This isn't a surprise to them. They know they have to change. It just takes longer for them to change. And now Tesla's sadly, no longer the leading light in electric cars. It's just one of many.
It's kind of interesting. What surprised me about this mini energy crisis that we are sort of on the verge of is, obviously in the financial sector, they do loads of stress tests constantly to make sure that the system can undergo, different shakes and that sort of thing, given what happened, as you alluded to, 2008 and 9. You would think with energy, especially because when they were doing Brexit scenarios of a no deal and this sort of thing, they said energy could be affected. I'm surprised that there wasn't anything that was sort of brought up in, stress testing of the energy sector when they were planning for that. It was kind of surprising.
Yeah, but I think read between the headlines. I don't tend to read the news much at all, but sometimes it pops up. But if you read between the headlines, a few small energy firms are going to go bust, and a handful of unfortunate consumers are going to have to pay the going rate for their energy, as opposed to paying a discount, a leveraged discount price, because those companies are trading on prices that are unsustainable if it moves. It was like the mortgage crash, the property crash, in 2000 or whenever it was. People just had 110% mortgages. It's an unsustainable thing that then led to better regulation. If you can self-certify for a mortgage as a self-employed person, I could say I earn 500 grand a year and I want a £3 million mortgage. They would have given it me.
Yeah,
it's a madness. Now you can't do that. So, I read between the headlines. It's not a disaster. It's just a hiccup. It's unfortunate for the poor people who can't afford more expensive utility bills, and the government could do something to step in and support them. But look at people like OVO Energy. See a business that's built on disclosure. I know OVO very well and the founder, but that's a business being built on proper forecasting, proper planning. And it's trying to do the right thing, not just come in cheap and undercut. Airlines.
Because it's very narrow and not widespread. You think it's a few players that have been affected rather than the sector. Yeah, I go with that.
The sector's not going to crash. We just got to have to pay more, but we all know that, and it's all part of life. Here comes the start of inflation.
Yeah, I know. Good, lovely, eh? So going back to some of the points that I picked up on the book, which I thought was excellent. It kind of seems to me that one of the overriding themes when you are building and scaling a successful business, and you are consciously or almost always thinking about the potential exit, How much, and this is clearly the great piece of, well, there's some great advice from you, Chris, in the book, and maybe you can share now, but how you should, as a founder, prepare it for that eventuality, not just like it's going to happen, in a couple of months, but the whole process that went through your mind around the exit, I thought was really interesting, because it's such a key thing. And I just wondered if you could sort of share, how you planned for that, or that eventuality.
Yeah, that's it was a really important part of my whole learning experience, and I didn't really give it a lot of thought until after the fact, if I'm absolutely honest. And I had some advice over the years about, if you want to sell your business, you need to be well prepared. You need to give yourself lots of time. And the reality is, for most businesses that have grown organically, so I'm not talking about, a highly funded tech startup that's been born to sell, basically. I'm talking about, most other businesses that are growing through organic or funding, but, have a timeline. Like, I want to grow this business over 5 years to be the best service provider of whatever that might be, secondhand cars, which we'll talk about later. Really, a 2 to 3 year timeline is key. It takes a long time to get your house in order, to make your business look and act in a way that acquirers will want to buy it, to get rid of the skeletons of the wardrobe, to organize everything, to make you as valuable as you can be. Because it's not just about your P&L, although that's obviously a big part of it, or your audience, your customer base, but also it's about, de-risk. How risky is it buying this business? And if the risk is high because you haven't organized anything, everything's very complex and confusing, then the value will be lower to cover or mitigate that risk. So I reckon give yourself 3 years, certainly 2 years, minimum of a year, because if you're rushing around trying to organize your house while you're selling, the chances are you're going to miss the fact that you're no longer running your business successfully, and your value could drop because you got your eye off the ball. So, a good amount of time is very important.
What triggered that? What triggers that 2 to 3 year preparation period, in your opinion? Because do you just decide, okay, 3 years from now I'm going to sell it, or is there something that happens that leads to that preparation?
So I think lots of founders have different motivations as to why they want to sell and what triggers a sale. Some, it's a timeline that I've set up at the start. I want to be out of this in 5 years. The market's changing. I need to, monopolize what I'm doing. Others, they get to a point where they just can't be bothered. And as founders, you'll find lots of people will cycle through a kind of, why am I doing this? This is crazy. I'm not suitable for this. This self-doubt. And then that will trigger them thinking, I need to get out. And there's always loads of buyers in the market who most of the time are just fishing. You get loads of unsolicited emails and calls from VCs or larger corporates saying, we really like what you do. We'd like to sell. And often it's through a broker. And of course, a broker gets paid by finding people to buy. So, a whole range of things trigger it. For me, it was, we were growing really well. We'd been running in New York for a few years. New York was doing very well. London was growing fast. We were looking at expanding in Australia. And I just thought, actually, the best time to sell is when you're growing, not when you've grown. So if you sell at the peak, there's a risk that you start to slide down the other side before the deal's done, or before any warranties are sorted, or if you have an earn out or anything like that. So selling on the way up is definitely the answer, which is quite often what will trigger people's decision. We're doing well. I can see the next couple of years we've got fantastic growth. I've reached a point when the value meets my need, and therefore, rather than be greedy, I'll exit now, allow the business to grow, and walk away happy.
Yeah, I think that's very valid, as the growth rate is usually used in the calculations for the value, enterprise value. So it makes a lot of sense to, go at your peak growth rate rather than peak growth.
Yes, exactly.
And then Chris, looking at you as a founder and a leader within the organization as it grew and scaled, I suppose what advice would you give to people who are potentially either experiencing or will maybe experience the sort of acceleration that you had, where your team grew from 3 or 4 people to, I think there were hundreds in the end. Is that correct?
No, we didn't quite reach that quite reach that
near there, wasn't it?
Mid-70s.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. So did you find that you had to adapt, and what would be the best piece of advice you could offer founders of fast scaling businesses, as in the management type criteria?
Absolutely. My main piece of advice is to get external support. Bring in someone you can talk to who can support you outside of your day-to-day business challenges. Whether you've got a partnership or a sole founder, that you're really struggling to share your personal concerns, your deep worries, and you spend the whole time with a massive smile on your face saying, everything's fine, we're brilliant, this is going to be great, don't worry, we've lost our biggest client, or this technology's completely failed, but don't worry. And also you can be your worst person. You can be shouty and angry and short, and you need help. So my number one piece of advice is to bring someone or people in to support you with that. So non-exec, an advisor, a mentor, someone who has been through a similar process, but also someone who's disconnected, who can look at it very objectively. It's a balance. And also upgrade them through your career. Like your team, the person who's got you here won't get you out of here. This perceived wisdom that's got us into this situation won't get us out. So you need to switch up, switch your advisors, switch your mentors, all those sorts of things as you grow your team the same way. And the other part is, you're always going to be the center of attention. No matter how much you want to act like a CEO of a sort of huge FTSE company, the reality is you're not. You're an entrepreneur, you're running your business, you're the story, you're the figurehead, you're the person the press wants to talk to, the clients want to be sold to, the staff join up to work for you, and the funders are backing you. So, get your head into it, that you're it until there's an exit. And once you get comfortable with that, then life's not so hard, actually. You realize that this is my job, this is my path, and I crack on.
Yeah, there's a good caveat there you mentioned the funding side of things. Various founders we talk to have a whole variety of good, bad, and ugly experiences. How was yours when it came to finding your backers, and did you court many and find it exasperating, or were you lucky and someone just kind of popped up and you shared the vision and they backed you all the way? What was that story like, Chris?
Well, I guess for us, I funded the whole business all the way through its growth, and rightly and wrongly, in some ways, if I'd had funding at some point, I would have grown the business bigger and faster and exited sooner. So
did you regret that?
No, I don't generally. I know this sounds cheesy, but I don't generally regret anything I do other than being shouty. But I guess as long as you're aware of it, you can improve it. So no, I don't regret it, because my exit was fantastic, and it was for a value that was more than I was hoping for. But it is lonely at the top. It is hard on your own. If you've got backers, you can find better support, faster acceleration. Flip side is, as you will have spoken to lots of people as I have, backers can also constrict growth. They have a different vision of where your business should be going. They have a set of expectations around profit or growth or targets, regional expansion, product development, that doesn't fit with your moral compass. And a good one, which I probably shouldn't talk about, but I will, is you and Blair's business, White Hat, the recruitment company. They had a brilliant moral objective, which was basically change the diversity of boardrooms by using the whatever the employment government employment incentive is to get apprentices, the apprentice levy into business. They're the middleman. They manage the apprentices, they do the training, they integrate them into the client. The client has to pay the money, the business has to pay money. So it was a genius idea, and that would drive a future boardroom that was more diverse, social, ethnic, sex, everything. Mm-hmm. And they're backed by VC or PE, I'm not sure which. And guess what? That's no longer their drive. Their drive is much more around being a recruitment business.
Funny that.
So, I mean, that's just one. And maybe that was Ewan's vision. I don't know. I don't know him very, particularly. But it's an interesting to see. It works brilliantly for some businesses and it's calamitous for others. If your only interest is money, get backing. Knock yourself out. Go for it. If your interest is doing something different, good, better, then sometimes backing can be the wrong thing to do. But each person, each case, each business has different requirements.
That's interesting. And then you touched on the pandemic earlier in our chat. I mean, look, Anthony and the other colleagues of mine at Notwich, we've clearly seen somewhat of a change in some of the businesses that have kind of is that a dog? Oh yes, it is. We've seen somewhat of a change in the business landscape. Some businesses geared around the pandemic. It's an interesting area. I know you have some good or strong opinions on this. I wondered if you could share what your sort of thoughts have been around the business landscape during the pandemic and how we've seen some successes, some failures, and really where, as we move out of the pandemic, you think advice should be focused.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fascinating thing to watch from the sidelines, and I am very lucky that I wasn't in the middle of it all in some ways. But equally, I started coaching at the start of the pandemic. Anyone and everyone who wanted a coaching, mentoring, or a shoulder to cry on for free. I just sent it out to all my contacts, everyone on LinkedIn. And I had a whole range of different people come and get in touch with me and say, I just want to talk, I need help. And all of them had the same initial challenge, which was no idea what's going to happen. Are we going to go bust? Are all our contracts going to dry up? Is funding going to stop? It was a real, just like a wall hitting every person, every business owner. But very quickly, almost business, once the first few months passed and people had realized that actually it wasn't stopping business, people got moving. And the resounding feedback from everybody I coached was that smaller businesses used this as an opportunity to refocus, to say, hang on a second, we've just been riding out this wave of cash and easy life, relatively easy, not as easy as it was in 2006, 2007. And suddenly we realize we're bloated. We've got people we don't need who are dragging us down, or we sell products and services that don't make sense just because we could. So pretty much all the people I've worked with have refocused. And that refocus has reinvigorated their businesses. It's made them much smarter, much stronger. And they've had their best quarters, best years on record. I mean, one company I work with, their first, let me have a think. Their first quarter of this year was brought in more revenue than all 4 quarters last year. And they were only slightly down last year, the main COVID year, on the previous year. So they've just boomed from it. But small businesses advance and change faster than big. And I'll use a couple of examples, if I may. Things that I've watched and been fascinated in. So my first one is Hopin. So if you're unfamiliar with Hopin is basically a virtual events business. And it was set up in 2019 by Johnny Beaufort Hat. That's a complicated surname. So it was born before COVID.
I mean, the timing doesn't get better. The serendipitous timing doesn't get better.
Don't steal my lines, Anthony. But it's bonkers, right? This guy had this vision, you know, and it's a trend. You know, less people are traveling, fewer people are traveling to global conferences. Yeah, conference attendance is dropping because we can't afford it. Carbon footprint, you know, we're all mindful about money and unnecessary stuff, and you know, businesses always looking at the bottom line. So, you know, I mean, Johnny set up the business, really nice model, really simple. Shouldn't have been a massive organization or massive business. I mean, at the moment, in the last records, they've got $100 million recurring revenue, annual recurring revenue. The last raise was $450 million. I mean, the guy is 27, and what I love, his quote is, I'll read his quote. I feel lucky. He said, you work really hard, you make some crucial decisions to get your business to where it is, but there's also a big part of luck that takes you there. And I mean, talk about right place, right time, right person, because he could just monopolize on that vision. And his most recent statement around funding, he said, you know, the market's going to get back to normal. People are going to go to conferences, but we still see a big future for a mix of, you know, physical and virtual events. Mm-hmm. So I think what John's done is amazing, and that's a great story of started something in the right place at the right time and monopolized on it. I mean, there are 1,000 other hop-ins that have gone nowhere. I'm sure, you know, nothing is unique, no idea is new. The other one, which I feel slightly less in love with, but it's still a brilliant positioning, Kazoo, back to our secondhand car market. Mm-hmm. So 2018, it was Alex Chesterman gave birth to Kazoo. I mean, Alex is, as those who, I mean, sure everyone knows that, love film, Zoopla, you know, I mean, he knows his stuff, and he's got a lot of money. And in a lot of respects, it's easy to raise money when you've got money because it's less of a risk. True. But give him his due. I mean, he went hell for the fundraising, sponsorship. As the funding came in, they've acquired so many businesses, from AI businesses to logistics businesses. It's absolutely bonkers. And within 3 years, they reverse listed into a SPAC for a $7 billion revenue in 3 years, from nothing to $7 billion fund valuation. I mean, madness. Now, unlike Hopin, which is clearly a tech platform, what is Kazoo? And is Kazoo just a lot of buzz around a secondhand car dealer, or is it a technology platform? I'm thinking they're a car dealer who are building up to be a technology platform. But
you smell another WeWork situation there? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, well, WeWork's just greedy. They just grew too fast.
But were they a tech platform, or were they just office space rental?
No, they're office space rental.
That's not what they said.
Yeah, no, of course. But I mean, technically, because they had to have contracts with leasing offices, whereas Uber is a technology platform because it just is a platform. It doesn't have any contracts with anyone. You know, it just connects you to a driver. So that's the difference. You know, Savills would be a better version. They're a technology platform that then connects you to someone with some real estate that you can rent. So, but Kazoo's interesting. It's the right place, right time, definitely. The secondhand car market before COVID was pants. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, it's not you couldn't sell them, but there was not a lot of value, and everything lined up. You know, massive pent up need. People sitting on their bums with nothing better to do than search cars. Massive amounts of government stimulus going into individuals' pockets. There's cash everywhere,
and also people not wanting to take public transport.
Well, people not wanting to take public transport, and then the chip crisis. You can't buy a new bloody car. Yeah. So that alone has knocked the secondhand car market value by 10 to 20%. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, right, brilliant, genius. And that's what's so important about, I think, you know, what's important about COVID and what's happened is that it's made people realize that if you want something that's good, you can't wait. You've got to go for it.